This week we're getting into the filming and editing of a kind of commercial project that I finished recently. We'll pick up right where we left off last week, right before the first shoot day. Now, after the train journey, I checked into the cheapest room I could find. Let's just say it was minimalistic. I had finally managed to book a slot at YouTube Space London, which is free for channels with more than 10,000 subscribers. So I made the most of that and booked out the main studio and plenty of equipment. Not to film with, but to use as props for our commercial about the filmmaking process. We were shooting on the trusty Canon T3i, which I still believe is a perfectly capable camera. We basically set up a situation and then let the actors improvise, riffing off each other and going with the flow. For a montage like this, we usually got more authentic moments from improvisation rather than when I script out every single detail. Before the next shoot, I managed to work out some of the simpler shots in the montage, including having my little brother act as a costume designer and a couple of friends flying a drone. And then it was back to London, starting with a morning shoot that was a decent walk from the nearest tube station. Once I got to the location I'd booked, I was expecting 4 actors, but after half an hour of waiting, it was clear that only one of them had decided to turn up. So in the true indie filmmaking spirit, we completely scrapped the entire plan for the day and had to come up with a new shot list based on what we could do with just one actor. Now, I had a second shoot that afternoon, so I rushed back to arrive at Hyde Park where all 4 of the actors showed up. I actually think this shoot got us some of the best looking footage from the whole thing, even though it was completely in natural light. Just goes to show that in the right situation, you can get decent results without spending loads of money or loads of time on the visuals. Now, the shoot was pretty relaxed, everyone was great, and we got all the shots we needed, and actually managed to make up for some of the ones we missed in the morning. But this whole time I'd been trying to see if I could film on a real set, rather than staging everything with actors. So I was getting in touch with all the filmmakers I know locally, and after getting in touch with about 5 different people, we finally found one that was at the right time for this project. So I went to Milton Keynes to shoot some behind the scenes for Carl, who you might remember I've worked with before. Now, they were shooting all night long, so that was certainly an experience, but it gave me a nice variety of footage and some credibility since this was actually a real set. So over the next few weeks, I squeezed in a couple of extra little shoots whenever I had the chance, including stumbling across a much bigger budget production, so I made the most of it and got some shots on my phone. Eventually though, I ran out of time and needed to send the footage off to be edited. Now, this was the first time I've worked with a professional editor. You might know Sven from his YouTube channel, This Guy Edits. He's got some great stuff about storytelling through editing. So I was really glad to be collaborating, but there were 3 main complications. 1, there are 5,000 miles between us, so we could only communicate by Skype or email. 2, there's 8 hours between us as far as the time zone shift, so we were rarely working at the same time. And thirdly, I'm just not used to working with an editor. I'm not used to having to explain my ideas verbally rather than just doing it myself. So those 3 things made communication, which really is the cornerstone of collaboration, a little bit more difficult, but I guess that's how you learn. So I basically gave Sven a broad idea of what I was going for and some reference examples of the kind of pacing I was looking for, and then he'd start assembling the cut. And this is really where it's so good to collaborate, because he saw the footage in a completely different way, selecting some stuff that I would have completely skipped past and really digging around to find the story behind each shot. Now, Sven has just started an in-depth series about the editing of this project, so I'll leave that in a link in the description in case you'd like to check it out. So meanwhile, I got started with the music. It's worth locking down the music pretty early on, especially with a montage like this. Now, I was watching Andrew Huang's videos, and I really loved these percussive tracks, and he was actually kind enough to let me sample some of his individual sounds and use them to make my own rhythms. So I sent a rough version of the music to Sven, and then he would send back different versions of the edit, and I would give feedback each time. And finally, there was post-production sound, which might actually be the part of the process that I look forward to most, because it always makes a significant improvement to the project at a time when I'm usually thinking the whole thing's been a giant disaster. All it means is watching it through and making a long list of every single thing that could make some noise, and then either finding the sound online or recording it yourself. and then painstakingly mixing all of that together. It can be a bit boring, but it makes a huge difference to the final product. So there we go, that was a brief overview of this kind of different project, and I'll see you next week.